Uh, Monday, July 13th, Maplewood City Council meeting to order. Tonight, I wanted to start out our meeting by talking about the homeless camp that we had in town behind the library. These truly are challenging times for many people, and like other metro cities, unsheltered homeless are struggling as many homeless shelters have reduced their capacity due to the pandemic. Governor Walz issued an emergency order prohibiting removal of homeless encampments except under very limited circumstances. Tonight, I have asked Public Safety Director Nadeau to provide all of us, and to those listening as well, more details about the homeless camp. Chief Nadeau, I know you're on as a participant. Would you please give us an update?
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, members of the City Council. The declaration of a peacetime state of emergency by Governor Walz currently prohibits physically removing homeless encampments in an effort to reduce the spread of COVID-19 unless the local government is providing adequate housing or the encampment has reached a size or status where it is a threat to safety, health, or the security of the residents. Since this order, an encampment formed on or about March 12, 2020, within the city of Maplewood on city-owned parkland on the south side of Legacy Park, just north of the Birch Run Shopping Center. The camp started out as a couple of tents and a couple of people and continued to grow as time went on. From the middle of March until the camp was disbanded, the number of people visiting and staying in the camp fluctuated from about 6 to about 15 people at any given time, and the number of tents increased from 6 to 15. Chief Lucan, our emergency manager, Molly Wellens, our health official, police department employees, sheriff's office homeless outreach staff, and nonprofits such as People Incorporated regularly checked in with the residents and visitors to the camp and made sure there was food, water, ice on hot days, portable toilets, and a hand washing station that were available to guests and residents of the encampment. Although there were some police and EMS calls for service in the first couple of months, they were mostly for medicals and check the welfare of resident type calls with a few minor disturbances. In the past 2 months, the calls for service began to change to major assaults, including assaults with knives and threats of guns. The two most notable calls that occurred within the last few weeks were as follows. On June 30th, after an argument with another resident, a male entered a pond behind the encampment and did not come back out. Maplewood officers and firefighters, along with a Ramsey County dive team, spent about 8 hours trying to locate the male without success. He was found drowned 2 days later by a volunteer group assisting in the search. The death is still under investigation. On July 6th, a resident of the encampment got into a physical argument with a male and a female who had previously forced him out of the area that he claimed within the encampment. He returned the next morning with a machete and began to cut the victim's tent, nearly striking the male in the head. He then threatened both victims with great bodily harm and death. When officers arrived, the male fled on foot. He was arrested a couple of days later for this and outstanding warrants. It was becoming clear that substance abuse and mental illness were factors in the disorder and the escalating violence at the encampment. In addition to the escalating violence, the conditions at the camp continued to deteriorate, with the encampment having more physical structures, including numerous pallets, fencing, and other building materials. Garbage and waste could no longer be contained and were overflowing down the embankment towards the pond and into the parking lot. We found that although the initial group of residents were cooperative with those from the city and the county, new residents were less willing to partner and work towards solutions. Chief Lucan had been working with the county and emergency management for over 2 weeks to find suitable housing for the residents of the encampment. After days and weeks of searching and working with other partners, we could not find any shelters or placements for the residents of the encampment. After we informed the mayor and city manager of the issues surrounding the encampment, the decision was made to close the encampment and temporarily relocate the residents who remained. The encampment was posted on July 8th, and some of the residents decided to leave at that time. On July 9th, Chief Lucan, Health official Molly Wellens, police staff, and public work staff met at the encampment and worked with the residents who still resided there. All 6 residents agreed to move to temporary housing and were transported to an area hotel with their belongings and provided with their own room due to COVID-19 concerns. The city paid for the rooms and will be reimbursed through COVID-19 related grant monies. Public works staff then removed all of the garbage and debris from the site. The refuse filled 2 full roll-off dumpsters the city provided, as well as 1 additional dump truck. At this time, the city continues to try to assist the former residents in the encampment by finding a more permanent solution, but we are challenged by the lack of shelter space and temporary housing. The pandemic has stretched thin the limited resources to help people experiencing homelessness, and at this time, there are few options. I have to say that I was impressed by how our city worked with other partners in navigating this difficult and complex situation. While there was few good options available, the residents of the camp were treated with respect and dignity, and we even made arrangements for them to continue to receive food while they were in their temporary housing in the hotels. Mayor, I would be happy to answer any questions that you or the city council may have, and you can rest assured we continue to work on trying to find a more permanent solution for the people that were in the encampment. I spoke to Fire Chief Lucan today. We continue to try and navigate county systems and nonprofits in an effort to address the needs of the unsheltered in our community. And like I said, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chief Nadeau, for that complete report. One thing that I wanted to ask, and I already know the answer, but in terms of any children at the camp, that was always something as I was keeping up to date with City Manager Coleman about what was happening at the camp. I was asked whether or not we had any children that were there. Do you want to respond to that?
Thank you for the question, Mayor. I think that there was children who may have visited the camp, but there was no children that we knew of that were living there, and there was no children that were relocated as a result of us closing down the encampment.
Okay, thank you very much. Council members, the order for questions tonight is as follows. Councilmember Neblett is first, Councilmember Juniman, Councilmember Smith, and then Councilmember Knutson. So let's do our round robin. If any of you have any questions for Public Safety Director Nadeau, feel free to ask. City Council Member Neblett.
Thank you, Mayor. No questions, but I just want to acknowledge the efforts that the city, both City Manager Coleman and her staff, as well as Chief Nadeau and his team. This is a hard situation, but I just want to say that I appreciate everything that was done. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Juniman.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I don't really have a question either. I kind of echo what Councilmember Neblett said. Thanks to, all the staff, that includes Public Works and certainly Chief Lucan and Molly Wellens, everybody who had anything to do with this. This was an everyday, task. And I think we stayed on top of it. And I really feel everybody involved from the city standpoint did their best. I only have one comment, and it doesn't involve us really. It's just that it comes to my mind frequently. The nearest local government unit responsible for health and human services is the county. And I think they weren't ready. And so what's new? I think more of the onus is on them. Just a thought.
Thank you. Councilmember Smith.
Yeah, I would second definitely all the things to the staff. I know this was a tricky situation. I'd also like to acknowledge that I think some of the neighbors there were remarkably understanding of this situation. I think this is the sort of thing that a lot of times people get alarmed about and make a bunch of assumptions, and it feels like the neighbors were quite patient and let this play out in a really reasonable way. So I think it's a good example where I think these strange times bring out the good in people.
Very much agree with that. Councilmember Knudsen.
Yeah, I think how we treat people like this speaks to the character of the community. You don't need to be harsh. You need to be firm. You need to be respectful. And I think Chief Nadeau said respectful a number of times in his discussion. I think that's really important. But I do think, as someone mentioned, this is kind of a regional issue. And I think it speaks to the character of our region, and the character of Maplewood certainly is to figure out a way to effectively deal with this concern and problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Just some closing words on it. I have had discussions with some nonprofits, certainly with staff, with City Manager Coleman. I have spoken with the county about this. I've even spoken with Representative Betty McCollum about this because this is certainly something that is not traditionally in a city wheelhouse. We don't employ social workers. That really falls under the county in terms of their health and human services, and it also falls under the state. And I was told that in Ramsey County, there are over 300 unsheltered homeless living in the county. That's just Ramsey County. I believe that Hennepin County has more. I know that there are some other cities in Ramsey County who also have homeless camps, St. Paul, but also some other suburban cities as well. And, it's very apparent that, we have some issues that we will continue to work on. I know I am committed to working on this and coming up with some solutions because this is really a challenging social issue for all of us. So with that, I'm going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you, Public Safety Director Nadeau, for that report. And let's stand and do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. City Clerk Sint, will you do our roll call for us?
Councilmember Neblett.
Present.
Councilmember Juniman.
Here.
Councilmember Smith.
Here.
Councilmember Knudsen.
Here.
Mayor Abrams.
Here. Okay, council members, on to approval of the agenda. Are there any additions or changes to the agenda? Councilmember Neblett. Do you have anything to
No,
add?
thank you.
Councilmember Juniman.
Thank you.
I have one, Green Steps Cities Award.
Okay, Councilmember Smith.
Done for me, thank you.
Okay, and Councilmember Knudsen.
No, thank you.
I will add the regional mayors and superintendents Zoom meeting that I attended. Okay, with that, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So move.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Juniman, seconded by Councilmember Knudsen. Motion to approve the agenda. Any further discussion? Councilmember Neblett.
None.
Councilmember Juniman.
None, thank you.
Councilmember Smith.
Thank you.
Councilmember Knudsen.
No, thank you.
All right, all those in favor? Councilmember Neblett.
Aye.
Councilmember Juniman.
Aye.
Councilmember Smith.
Aye.
Councilmember Knudsen.
Aye.
The motion passes, the approval of the agenda. I vote aye as well. And we move on to approval of the minutes. The June 22nd, 2020 City Council meeting minutes. Is there a motion?
I move.
I heard Councilmember Juniman first.
Good.
Councilmember Councilmember Juniman moves to approve the June 22nd, 2020 City Council meeting minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Knutson. Any further discussion? Councilmember Neblett,
No, thank you.
Councilmember Juniman,
None, thank you.
Councilmember Smith,
No, thank you.
Councilmember Knutson.
No, thank you.
Okay, then all those in favor, Councilmember Neblett,
Aye.
Councilmember Juniman,
Aye.
Councilmember Smith,
Aye.
Councilmember Knutson,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. The approval of the minutes passes. Moving on to appointments and presentations. Councilmember Juniman, you want to talk about Green Step Cities?
Yes, we're great. What can I say? We are again awarded step 5, but at this point in time, step 5 has steps, if you will. And the only way you can move forward is if you improve on best practices for being environmental. And we needed to improve on 5, and we actually improved on 12. I'll just give you a couple of examples. A reduction in electric use in city buildings, increased number of charge stations for electric vehicles, 28% increase in solid waste composting, and an 18% decrease in greenhouse gas emissions in city operations. And there are 7 more. So we did well again, and we will be receiving another block 5 in the mail at some future date. And I really want to thank our ENR Commission and certainly environmental planner Sean Fimmel and Emily, the environmental technician, and several of the improvements were tracked by Nature Center employees, because there was so much to keep track of in order to get 12 to move forward. So it was a group endeavor, and we've done it again. So even in strange times, we move forward. So I thank everybody who had anything to do with that, and we should be proud that we're able to keep doing that. Thank you.
Wanted to update you briefly on the regional mayors and superintendent Zoom meeting that I attended today. The regional mayors meet on a monthly basis, and we are off next month, and then we'll start convening again in the fall. But this was our annual meeting with the mayors and also the superintendents of schools. And really the focus of the Zoom meeting today was to talk about what's happening in the schools with distance learning and what schools are doing to prepare for the fall. And it really is quite amazing. I think we've got some fabulous educators in our communities. And I can tell you that all of the schools are preparing for a variety of alternatives, certainly waiting to see what happens with the pandemic. But it seems to me that the conversation focused on there will be both in-person learning and also options for students to do distance learning. And, I think the superintendents were pretty candid talking about there were actually some positives about distance learning, that kids that tended to be more quiet or didn't participate certainly had one-on-ones with their teachers. And so I know that it was really easy to listen to the news and hear about the negatives and how challenging and difficult it was. And I certainly know that was a challenge for many, many families to have, kids learning from home in a very different kind of a setting. But the school districts are really taking their time to get this right. They want to make sure that the schools are ready for children to return if that's what's going to be happening. And it sounds to me like there will probably be more movement of teachers as opposed to movement of students. that the students probably will stay in, their classroom socially distanced, and the districts are all working on it. And it seems to me that they were working very collaboratively and sharing ideas about what's working for them. And so it was an interesting snapshot for all of the mayors to hear from the superintendents about what's going on. So yeah, with that, let's move on to the council calendar update. I think I took that out of order. Sorry about that, City Manager Coleman.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council. The council calendar indicates that on July 27th, we will be doing a preliminary review of the 2021 budget. And most of you are aware of the many challenges we've had to bring you a 0% budget, but we are getting close to being able to deliver on that request. And so we'll update you on that. In addition to that, we are going to look at review of possible liquor ordinance amendments. And this is really a result of a redevelopment proposal in the Maple Ridge Shopping Center where the Rainbow Foods was located. We have a developer grocer who wants to go into that site, and they are asking to get a liquor license for a liquor store adjoining the grocery store. And we'd have to amend our liquor ordinance to do that. We do have a distance requirement, and there is a liquor store immediately to the east across White Bear Lake or White Bear Avenue. In addition to that, I wanted to let you know that last week, Director Thompson sent out a letter to all of our off-sale liquor establishments, letting them know that this liquor amendment would be under consideration and that some options would be discussed by the City Council at the meeting on the 27th. Jeff has not indicated that there's been a lot of feedback yet, but we will give you an update on that in the Friday FYI this week. And you'll be getting a report then for the meeting on July 27th. That then will come before the council, the grocery store development and the liquor store ordinance amendments, should you choose to pursue that on August 10th. In addition to that, on August 10th, we'll be hearing a report from community development on abandoned housing licensing and how that is done in other communities, and some options for you to consider if you'd like to move forward with that type of ordinance. So with that, Mayor, that's my report for now. I'm happy to answer any questions or take direction if there's things council would like some discussion on at a future meeting.
Thank you for that report. Councilmember Neblett, do you have anything else?
Yes, and I think talk about being out of order. I probably should have put this on the agenda earlier, but this past, I think it was last week maybe, I was talking to Peter Fisher about T21. I remember asking City Manager Coleman about that at our last meeting. And according to he and Nancy Livingston, who is Chuck Weger's assistant, the governor signed the T21 bill. It just that everything happened at the same time. Corona and everything else happened at the same time he signed it. So that's just a little information. I'm not sure where we go from there, but I was glad to hear that it actually made it to the governor's desk and he actually signed it. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councilmember Neblett. It brings up a very good question, and I'll ask it. Do we need to do anything with our ordinances now that we have a state law concerning T21? City Manager Coleman, do you want to weigh in on that? And maybe
yes, Mayor, thank you. We are indeed going to be bringing that ordinance amendment to the City Council, I think the second meeting in August. We have sent out letters to all of our on-sale liquor establishments and off-sale liquor establishments about the new law, and giving them an opportunity to weigh in on that. But for the most part, we don't anticipate people will be opposed to it because they have to do it. It's a state law. We're just going to bring our current ordinance into compliance with the new state law. So yes, we are going to take care of that at an upcoming meeting.
Thank you very much for that. And thank you, Councilmember Neblett, for bringing that forward. Councilmember Juniman.
Excuse me. No, nothing.
Councilmember Smith.
No, thank you.
Councilmember Knutson.
No, thank you.
All right, then moving on to our consent agenda. Is there a motion concerning the consent agenda?
Mayor, I would like to ask a question about the conditional use permit, if I would, please.
Oh, certainly. Okay, so you want to highlight, is that number 2?
Correct.
Okay.
I also have, Mayor, I also have a question about that,
Okay.
and I'd like to highlight number 3.
Okay, so let's start with number 2. I'm going to look at the agenda. City Manager Coleman, who has that? That's the conditional.
Mr. Thompson.
Mr. Thompson.
Mr. Thompson?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Did you want me to do a brief introduction of this item?
Yes, if you would, please. I think that's always helpful for people that are at home. And then we will get questions from City Council Member Knutson and then Juniman too.
Sure. So, Mayor, what's before the council tonight is back in 2015, the council approved, or before that, the council approved a conditional use permit as well as other development application items for the CarMax dealership that's kind of across the street from Costco. And the construction on that was completed in 2015 with the certificate of occupancy issued in July of that year. As part of, there is a wetland that was historically on that site, and with our ordinances, we require a 3-year maintenance of the buffer once it's established on the property. And it was maintained for 2 years, but in the inspection in 2017, the city discovered that they had not satisfied the maintenance requirements. And so we've been working with them to continue to reestablish the buffer. And they have been receptive to doing that and to ensure that that continues to be maintained through the fall of 2021. Just to note one thing, in addition to the conditional use permit and the annual review that the city can do, we are actually still holding a very substantial letter of credit for this project. So if they do fail to maintain the buffer or fail to perform under the terms of the council's approval, the city does have the right to use that letter of credit for maintenance of the buffer, ensure that that gets established. But that's kind of a last resort. And given our current conversations, we are confident that they will meet the maintenance requirements through next year. So we're just asking you to continue the conditional use permit review for 1 more year. We will monitor it over the next year and then report back next year. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for that report. Councilmember Knutson, do you have any additional questions?
Well, no, I just, that was what I was looking for. I was wondering what the or what was if they don't maintain the buffer, because, you know, that piece of property has been under review for as long as I've been active in Maplewood. It's a wetland of high importance, and it's really critical that that be maintained properly. I had an opportunity to study the wetlands with the watershed district, and that area around Costco and all that is critically important to water quality. So I agree and thank you and appreciate the answer.
Okay, Councilmember Juniman, you had a question.
Yes, I guess my question is, what's the problem? They couldn't
Mr.
read the
Thompson?
2017 they needed to do it again, or what?
Mr. Thompson.
Certainly, Mayor and Council. So I believe again, the problem was they essentially stopped maintaining it, and as you know, once a buffer takes a significant amount of maintenance in the first years of its establishment, make sure that invasive species and non-native grasses don't kind of roll in or become established within the buffer. And once that does occur, then it just takes additional work to make sure that the native vegetation within that buffer is reestablished and any of the noxious weeds or any other invasive species are removed from that area.
Yep, I knew the answer to that part, but I can say it with tongue in my cheek. What's the problem? They signed the 3-year agreement. And you know, it's a lovely business. I'm impressed with the landscaping. They keep up the property. But if they're reneging on the environmental part, not impressed. And you know, maybe 2021 isn't long enough then. What are they going to do? Stop after that? That's an important one. Like I
Mr.
said,
Thompson, what are our options after 2021?
Mayor, well, I think like I said, I think the biggest tool that the city has that's unique to this case is the letter of credit. So if we are not satisfied with their maintenance of that buffer, normally our solution would be, to take action to revoke the conditional use permit. But I think the bigger motivation we have here is that we could actually cash that letter of credit and use that money. The city could use that money to actually take the action to establish the buffer and make sure that the maintenance is occurring. And that we found that in development, that is a strong motivation for property owners when they know we will use their money to do it for them.
Okay.
okay,
So
thank
what
you.
kind of timeline do we have, Mr. Thompson?
I'm sorry?
What kind of a timeline do we have to get this reestablished?
They've been working on it, and so that's why we said another year. We have had productive meetings with them. They are aware of what needs to happen, and we are continuing to work with them. But we will make sure we won't touch base just next year. We will continue to monitor it through this growing season to make sure that the work continues.
Mayor,
Okay.
can I ask one more question?
Certainly, Councilmember Knudsen.
Well, Mr. Thompson, I did a big restoration project up north with the help of Crow Wing County. My maintenance agreement was for 3 years. It seems to me that the 3-year agreement is typical to establish your plantings as when they become as fully established, the maintenance agreement tends to go away in 3 years. Is that correct? Is that the typical pattern?
Mr.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, I believe that the focus is on the 3 years for establishment of the buffer.
Right.
And that's where the majority of the work occurs, to actually plant it and get it to be established. After that, the work decreases because the plants kind of take hold and require less ongoing maintenance. But the requirement to have the buffer is an ongoing requirement.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Juneman, did you have anything else on this particular?
No, as long as Mr. Thompson and Ms. Finwall are going to be watching them, and it sounds like they need a reminder year after year, so I'm glad we have some way of reminding them.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we also have a highlight on number 3, the resolution to accept a donation from the Jensen family. City Manager Coleman, who's going to take this one?
Mr. Love.
Mr. Love.
Yes, Mayor and Council, good evening. Bob and Donna Jensen would like to donate $1,200 to the city for a memorial bench and plaque at the Fish Creek Preserve. Bob has a strong interest in preserving Maplewood's history and has been very instrumental in conducting archaeological digs along Fish Creek. And Donna is a true lover of nature and was one of the first Maplewood residents to create a totally natural wildflower yard about 25 years ago. With that, I'm available for any questions.
Councilmember Juneman.
No, I didn't have a question. I just wanted to highlight, because we always do for people who are kind and donate things. And I think it's wonderful that they want to do it at Fish Creek, which has both historical value and environmental value. So I just wanted them to be acknowledged. Thank you.
With that, I believe we've addressed any outstanding issues concerning the consent agenda. Do we have a motion?
I move approval of the consent agenda 1 through 4.
I think that was Councilmember Juneman. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Okay. So moved by Juneman, and is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Neblett. The motion to approve the consent agenda. Any further discussion? Councilmember Neblett.
No, thank you.
Councilmember Juneman.
Oh, thanks.
Councilmember Smith.
No, thank you.
Councilmember Knudsen.
No, thank you.
Okay, moving on to the vote. Councilmember Neblett.
Aye.
Councilmember Juneman.
Aye.
Councilmember Smith.
Aye.
Councilmember Knudsen.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. It's unanimous. Consent agenda passes. We have no public hearings tonight. We have no unfinished business. Moving on to new business, we have a resolution approving the formation of Parks and Recreational Programming Task Force and Nature Center Task Force. This is a follow-up after our last meeting. Mr. Sable and City Manager Coleman, you're both listed as presenters. Who's it going to be?
Mr. Sable will take it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Sable.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. Mike Sable, Assistant City Manager, HR Director. As you noted, the action we're looking for tonight is to approve the formation of 2 task forces for Nature Center and Parks and Recreation Programming. They are 2 independent task forces that will focus on each area of the Nature Center and the Park and Rec Programming. And as the staff report notes, the COVID-19 pandemic has created shifts in uncertainty around financial uncertainty, around revenue uncertainty, around operational and program uncertainty, and just general economic uncertainty in the community. And beginning in mid-March, because of the COVID-19, all in-person programming had stopped, and we had closed the facilities, including City Hall. And we had attempted in that time to maintain an online presence to offer some programs. But by early June, the decision was made to close the Nature Center and to stop all programming for Parks and Recreation. And that resulted in layoffs of staff. And as you noted at the June 22nd council meeting, there was a robust discussion about what to do next and how can the city reestablish these facilities and these programs in a financially sustainable way. And what this staff report does is try to create some opportunity to reimagine and pivot towards the future. And so what we have created at a very high level, put forward a proposal for these 2 task forces that will review existing services, programs, budgets, existing operating structures, to explore alternatives, partners, different funding models. And one of the other elements that was from the discussion of the council meeting was an opportunity to have underrepresented populations participate and engage in the design of whatever this future might look like, and that there be robust input from the public, either through surveys or other tools for direct feedback. In that time since the last council meeting, staff has met to provide some input, and the city has an existing model of task forces that have been successful. So the use of force task force is one example of a successful model. And so we've tried to replicate that closely, in that it have a broad, diverse group of residents, of key stakeholders, of informed participants. And so there's been plenty of staff input. And in fact, staff members, including the city manager, will be members of the task force. And I think it's important to note that there are the city and our funding partners and our nonprofit partners and other institutions have subject matter experts in these areas. And so as certain issues come up, we would be inviting those staff members to be participants and engaged in the conversation. And as Councilmember Juniman noted earlier in the update, the environmental planner, Sean Finwall, and Natural Resources Coordinator, Emily Dunlop, are key contributors. And so we would expect them to play a big role as subject matter experts, but maybe not as proposed to be members of the task force, but their input would certainly be helpful. Also, in the staff report, we put forward a rough outline of a timeline. Each task force would operate for approximately 4 months. We would anticipate a start in the mid-August timeframe, and currently anticipating about 6 meetings, which would end, if we did them every 3 weeks, would allow us to wrap up by mid-December. I think the one thing that COVID-19 has taught us is that we don't know what things will look like in 4 months, but it's likely to be uncertain. And so at some level, we'll have to be adaptive as conditions change. However, it's important that we have a framework in place and that we have key questions to answer. What I did want to also note for the council and the viewers at home is there are still things that don't change, right? That we still have access to the Nature Center trails. We still have a commitment to providing quality services, and long-term viability is an important component for us to consider. And it really does align with the strategic plan elements of community inclusiveness in getting robust feedback from all stakeholders and diverse residents, that financial state sustainability become a critical piece. As nearly at the Nature Center, I think the number is nearly 2/3 of the participants at the Nature Center come from outside of the city of Maplewood. So it has to have there's a regional draw and a regional element to the financial sustainability. It's also important that we manage our assets and our infrastructure well, and that we run and operate as effectively as we can. And so, Mayor and council members, that sort of summarizes my report, and I'm happy to sort of respond to any questions. I think the one thing I will say is that we are looking for a member of the city council to participate in each of the task forces. And so one of the actions that we would require, should you choose to go down this road, is to identify who those council members might be in service. So with that, I will stop.
Thank you, Mr. Sable, for your report. I have a couple of points. First, maybe it might be easier to talk first about the Nature Center Task Force. I was just out at the Nature Center last week, and I walked the trails, and it was absolutely beautiful. I did note that there was a tree down that was rather precarious, hanging over one of the trails. It looked like a storm could come and drop that tree. And thank you, Mr. Love. Public Works went out and took care of it. So I just want to encourage anyone who's listening to please go out and walk the Nature Center trails. It's really quite lovely out there. It's a beautiful time of year to really enjoy that the walkways and the boardwalk. It's really quite pretty. In terms of the Nature Center Task Force, I would just make a recommendation that Councilmember Juniman, I've kidded her in private that I think she bleeds green because she is so very environmental. She laughs about it, I can hear her. That you also, Councilmember Juniman also serves as the liaison with the Environment and Natural Resources Commission. And it just seems to me that that would be a natural fit for the council liaison to serve on the Nature Center Task Force. One thing about the task force, we really outlined as a council last time that, we wanted staff to come forward with a proposal to establish a task force that would represent stakeholders and residents. Just for a point of order, if we get to the point of moving the resolution, we would need to amend what's written down because it talks only about interested Maplewood residents. And I think that basically the list, we have, we really have to include stakeholders and interested stakeholders and Maplewood residents. Because I know that friends of the Nature Center, volunteers of the Nature Center don't all necessarily live in Maplewood. And I want to make sure that we have, stakeholders that can really help us formulate our next steps. And so we'll have to make that amendment on a resolution if we go forward with it. I also wanted to suggest that any recommendations that come from the task force, right now the resolution talks about it going to the city manager. Of course, the city manager is on both task forces, but really I think the report needs to come directly to the council so that we have that. In addition to the task force, we talked about surveying our members so that we can our residents so that we can truly get as much input as we can about what our Nature Center and what rec programming needs to look like going into the future. And so a survey, an online survey, I think would be very helpful. And in terms of once the task force is up and running, then a survey goes out to the residents so that we get that input. I think the more data that we have about this, I think the better we're going to be and the better solution we're going to come up with. And then also when we do get some options and some preliminary recommendations from the task force, at that point, I would then like to have a formal public comment at a city council meeting in response to what are the preliminary recommendations so that we can hear from people as to what they think. So I want to make sure that we get that public comment piece in. It wasn't necessarily clear to me in the timeline that that would happen, but before, you know, we wrap this all up and the council ultimately makes a decision, we really need to get as much input as we possibly can. So those are my comments concerning the Nature Center Task Force. In terms of Parks and Rec, excuse me, we need to also identify a council member. And in my mind, it makes sense for Councilmember Knudsen, since he currently is the liaison on Parks and Rec. Excuse me. That he be the person that serves on that particular task force. I think that you know, the timeline and everything else looks just fine in my mind for the Parks and Rec programming task force. So with that, council members, let's do a round robin and we'll hear what everyone else has to say. Councilmember Neblett, you're up first.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Couple of things. Right now, your meetings are scheduled for both these task force every 3 weeks for 2.5 hours each. Here's my, it just seems like a long time in between meetings. And I'm only basing this based on my experience with the use of force task force. I just don't want these things to get stale and people feel like things aren't moving. So 3 weeks in between meetings just seems long to me. That's just my opinion. The other thing is on the Parks and Rec Committee, it seems like you've got 4 staff people on that task force. Is there a reason for that?
Mayor, could I answer that question?
Yes, City Manager Coleman.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council. I think that the key stakeholders or the key staff leads would be Audra and myself, but we also see that Neil Brunneman has the most experience with the associations and scheduling, and really understands who the partners are very well. He's also going to be out of the office for an extended point of time because his wife is expecting their second child in August. But so he may be available and he may not. We're just kind of using him as needed. And then Director Nadeau, we suggested that he have a part in this as well because of his role with community engagement and how we see this kind of tying into how we use some of these partnerships with Park and Rec into how we also do community engagement moving forward. We believe that's going to look a little bit different. And it might be a marriage between the public safety staff and the Park and Rec staff that are still here. So that's why I think Audra and I will be the key participants, but I'll be leaning on the other 2 to provide some guidance as well, because Audra and I just don't have all of the information, especially about the associations in other cities.
Well, that makes more sense. I just don't want it to feel so staff heavy because in situations like this, you can, you know, as a citizens group, you want them to feel like they are really in control, if you will. And sometimes when you get so many staff people in there, it feels like you don't necessarily have control. So that's my only concern. I appreciate the explanation though. Those are my only 2 questions. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Neblett. Councilmember Juniman.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I've already spoken to City Manager Coleman about it, and I think and Mr. Sable did address it. I was a little concerned that Audra is mainly a parks person, although she knows a lot about open space and so on. So I wondered about Sean or Emily, but they are going to be the resource people, so that's fine by me. I am wondering though, and maybe we'll do this as we move forward with these and find out what our mission is, but the Parks and Recreation says Parks and Recreation Programming Task Force, and Nature Center says Nature Center Task Force. And I don't want to lose total idea that there are programs offered to the Nature Center that are educational. And so somewhere along the line, we have to make known that this is not just about opening a building again and having events and having a place to go in, but it's also about offering educational opportunities. So I don't want people to not have that in their heads when they're looking at this. If that makes any sense to anybody?
It does. Good point.
So I don't
Anything
know
else, Councilmember Juniman?
pardon me, I don't know if as people apply, we say something to them or what. I just want to make sure they know it's not just about the Nature Center and the trails. It's about the educational offerings. And at one point, I know I had spoken to City Manager Coleman about if we're actually looking at down the road how this is going to be sustainable, is that we may actually look at having Nature Center programming become part of parks programming, so that, you know, they could be under similar fee structures, and we could do the same thing as partnering with, you know, in the past we've thought about, never done it, but, you know, if, okay, let's say Maplewood's the soccer city, then everybody from North St. Paul, Littleton, or whatever could play soccer in Maplewood, and our kids could go other places for other sports. Likewise, people who use our nature center, and then there are other cities like Roseville that have one, how we could blend and offer programs similarly. I just don't want that to get lost.
Thank you. I think that that clearly characterizes my understanding of what the Nature Center Task Force is going to be charged with. It has to do with programming and use of the Nature Center. And so I think that's clear. City Manager Coleman, do you understand all that?
I do, Mayor. I think I would just also comment that through the application process, we will be creating questions. And I think some of you were on the council, some of you were on the task force when we did the use of force group. And if you'll remember right, we posted that we were looking for people to be on the task force. And we also looked by area in the city, but I'm not sure that that's as key here. But I think one of the things that'll be important is that we ask the right questions, because as I recall, you selected, the candidates for the task force were selected by the way that the questions were answered and they were ranked. So I think that's going to be really important that we ask the right questions. And I would also suggest that Mike and myself put together some questions for your consideration, and this will be done in between meetings so that we can keep this process going, if that's okay, and get feedback on what the questions should be of the people who are interested in serving.
Thank you.
Councilmember Juniman.
I'm sorry, that helps me. Thank you.
I think that's a very good idea to keep this process moving. And I'd like to reiterate too what Councilmember Neblett said about, you know, making sure that we have momentum so that we're moving forward on this. So yeah, thank you. Councilmember Smith, your thoughts.
I agree with Sylvia. I think the cadence of meetings is important, and I think that you know, I would rather we have more meetings in a shorter period of time and wrap up sooner. I'm not saying we necessarily need to add total hours to the commitment, but I do think being able to sort of, you know, this is different than an ongoing commission or something like that, as we've seen, and I think momentum is really critical. I also would agree that I do think it's important we get expertise from the staff involved, but that we are very careful to not have, you know, the Greek chorus of staff encircling the group the whole time. You know, that there has to be some, you know, autonomy for the group to feel like they're not being sort of overly managed, let's say, by the team, but and not out of any malfeasance, just out of, you know.
Sure, good point. What would you recommend in terms of frequency, Councilmember Smith?
I mean, we did weekly with the use of force task force, and I thought that was effective, particularly if you have enough folks that if there's one or two people that can't make a meeting, that it doesn't sort of kill the quorum. So I think it's really how much quorum can you rely on consistently. But
Okay.
I think weekly is weekly for 2 or 3 months would be ideal. But
Okay, we'll come back to other council members about that in terms of frequency. Anything else, Councilmember Smith?
No, I'm glad we're doing this. I think it's going to be a great conversation. Actually, I do have one other question, and this is not something I've talked to any of you guys about, so I'm very open to this being a terrible idea. But as things unfold with the ponds and usage of that space comes up, is there any room for this group to also think about that and what that space should be or could be? Or is that just too much to ask?
Mayor, could I comment on that?
Yes, City Manager Coleman.
Thank you, Mayor and Councilmember Smith. I think that within the next few weeks, you're going to see the planning process, the engagement process that we're going to put together with Will and Perkins.
Okay.
And the county has agreed to pay for that engagement process. We expect that it will start late summer, early fall.
Okay.
And that will be very robust, similar to what we did with the North End study.
Oh,
so
cool.
I really believe that we're
All right.
going to have, kind of a different approach to that group, but we will definitely be contacting the people who live in the area. And I know that there's still a lot of interest. So I think we do have a process in place for how to engage the community on that particular project.
That makes me feel really good. So thank you. I'm good with that. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Knudsen.
Yeah, I think the timeline and the meeting structure seems about right, because I think there's a lot to do in between meetings, and we're going to rely a lot on staff. My only other task force experience was EMS. That went on quite a while, but it was a lot of information in between. What was important, though, is that the volunteers that are on it were given more or less, the upper and lower control limits, the kind of things that we were going to do, what kind of decisions we were going to make. So it's really important that expectations and the freedom the group has, how it will be conducted, what the end result, what the report will look like, all those things to be said right up front so we can manage the process throughout. Because I think, this isn't just a short-term reaction to the COVID situation. This is basically resetting how these nature center and the parks and recs work in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you for that. I'm going to go back to Councilmember Neblett and ask you, what kind of frequency would you like to see on this? Because you were on the use of force task force.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mayor. I really appreciated the consistency of every week. We had tons of homework in between, and we were responsible for doing that homework, and it didn't get stale. And the interesting thing about that is that I think if we had spaced it out more, that people would be less likely to come. And we never had a problem with quorum. It was a 13-member task force, and we got a lot of work done. We did. It was a lot of information, but that meeting every Thursday night, it was just, I thought it didn't have a chance to get stale, and it moved, and people were responsible for doing their homework, and they took this responsibility very seriously.
Okay.
So,
thank you for that input. Councilmember Juniman, what do you think in terms of frequency?
Weekly is too often. And one of the reasons I think that is because if you look at the makeup of the Nature Center Task Force, you're looking for local or nonprofit partners, and you're also looking for schools, educators. Okay, when the time frame for this beginning in mid-August, and you're talking about educators who are going to be going back only the Lord knows how into teaching. And I just don't think, I think you'll miss out on some that might be willing to do it if you try and jam them up for every week when they've got a lot of other things that are basically outside the box going on at the same time. So I don't want to just disenfranchise people who might be interested by the frequency of occurrence. I think that's a problem.
Might I suggest a compromise? Our staff report talks about every 3 weeks, which I too, I understand that and appreciate that might be a little bit too long. So could we possibly do every 2 weeks?
Yeah,
so that's really twice a month.
Yeah. I just think you have to think of what the other things that people are doing right now. And I think the use of force task force was incredibly efficient and wonderful, but in my mind, it was a little bit different in the fact that it was a nature of immediacy following what had been going on. And this is more, in my mind, more long-term planning of how are we going to figure out to keep it going beyond. That task was shorter lived to get to the point of what we were looking for. And I just think it had a little bit different feel to it than this one does. That's all.
Okay. So with that, we've had a pretty good discussion. I'll go through round robin one more time to see if there's anyone else that wants to add anything. And then we will look to making a motion. Councilmember Neblett.
No, thank you.
Councilmember Juniman.
No, thank you.
Councilmember Smith.
I believe, thank you. I believe the 2 weeks is a good plan for this. I think Councilmember Juniman's points are well taken. It is a slightly different thing, so I'm cool with that.
Okay. And Councilmember Knudsen.
No, thanks.
Okay. Then I would entertain a motion with the proviso that we modify the bullets as follows, so that the first one, the city manager shall solicit applications from interested stakeholders and Maplewood residents. And then the other change would be that the recommendations come to the city council for changes to existing practices instead of just the city manager. With that, I would entertain a motion.
Mayor, may I make a comment, please?
Oh, sure.
I think it's important that we include stakeholders. I will say that.
Oh, right.
No, I'm agreeing with you, but
okay.
But I do want to make sure, though, this does not become a council or a group of sort of professional parks and rec naturalist types. Yeah, I think after we did the use of force task force, the Governor Dayton at the time did a very similar task force, but it was all activists, folks who were very involved, very deeply involved, and police and law enforcement professionals. And I feel like they were too invested, I think, in the outcomes of it for it to be a real citizens discussion. I think the strength of our group was that it was citizens, residents discussing the issues. So I just want to be cautious about.
Okay. I totally agree with you. I think, I really, I see that we need both on task force, both stakeholders and residents. And, I think that it's going to be an interesting blend. City Manager Coleman, do you want to weigh in on how we can balance this out? Because after all, the taxpayers of Maplewood pay for this. And that is something that we need to make sure is very, very clear, that this not just be about the stakeholders and they're having an agenda, but really not having skin in the game, as it were, because they are not taxpayers in Maplewood. And I think some of this is, we're dealing with what we have recognized through looking at the number of people that actually attend programs, that 2/3 of the people that attend programs there don't even live here in Maplewood. And so this really is a regional asset. And I think that one of the things I would hope would come out of this is that we would be looking for regional partners with a whole variety of organizations. But it is something that is an asset that belongs to the city of Maplewood, and the residents pay for and our businesses pay for through taxes. So City Manager Coleman, your thoughts on this?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Abrams, members of the City Council. I believe that, you know, in the staff report, we outlined potential members and identified people that we would be reaching out to solicit applications. I think if we follow that template, I think some of the natural breaks and, you know, the people that you want to engage on this group will come to the fore when you start looking at applications. I think we are trying very hard to bring in as many people with perspectives as we can. And I think part of it is we're just going to have to make sure we ask the right questions of the applicants, and then make sure that we're making decisions on who we think would best serve that group when you see those applications. And you might find that instead of, you know, people who are involved, like a bunch of professional people like the universities and colleges that come there and some of the other nonprofit organizations that use the facility, that it's more important to bring in more schools and other partners, the county. So I think we just have to sort of wait and see, but you are in the driver's seat here. So you can take the applicants that come in and divide those up in any pie that you want. So
Okay.
I think, you know, that's what we have to rely on, is that we get the kind of applicants that we need. And if we don't, then then we'll go to plan B, which is maybe doing some direct recruiting. I think there's a lot of opportunity here to get the right makeup that will make you feel comfortable that you're getting the best input that you can.
I appreciate that. And, you know, from all of the emails and the phone calls that I have had about the Nature Center, I have been inviting people to please consider joining the task force because they're obviously very passionate about it. And so I don't think we're going to have a hard time finding people. And I'm looking forward to, because I think we will have a number of people who will want to step forward and help us look at the Nature Center moving forward. So, okay, is there a motion?
Okay.
Then I will move the motion to approve the resolution for formation of the Parks and Recreation Programming Task Force and Nature Center Task Force, with the modification adding interested stakeholders and changing the report goes to the City Council.
Second.
Moved by Abrams, seconded by Juniman. The motion to approve the formation of task forces. Any further discussion? Councilmember Neblick.
No, thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Juniman.
No, thank you.
Councilmember Smith.
No, thank you.
Councilmember Knudsen.
No, thank you.
Okay, then moving forward to a vote, Councilmember Neblick.
Aye.
Councilmember Juniman.
Aye.
Councilmember Smith.
Aye.
Councilmember Knudsen.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. The motion passes. And now moving on to, we need to identify council members. And I had suggested Councilmember Juniman for the Nature Center Task Force and Councilmember Knudsen for the Parks and Rec Programming Task Force. City Manager Coleman, do we need to do a formal motion on that?
I guess it wouldn't hurt to make that appointment. I would go ahead and suggest a motion.
Okay.
Yes.
Then
So
I will make,
moved.
okay, moved by Neblitt. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Smith. The motion to approve City or Councilmember Juniman for the Nature Center Task Force and Councilmember Knudsen for the Parks and Rec Programming Task Force. Any further discussion? Councilmember Neblitt.
No, thank you.
Councilmember Juniman.
No, thank you.
Councilmember Smith.
Do they want to do it?
Yeah, good question.
I thought this was being
No,
drafted.
no, thank you.
Just
Too late.
Okay, then we're going to take a vote, and Councilmember Juniman and Councilmember Knudsen can, I mean, I think that they would have spoken up if they weren't interested.
I would hope so, but I just figured I'd put a fine.
Councilmember Neblett, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilmember Juniman?
Aye.
And I take it that you will be willing to serve?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Councilmember Smith?
Aye.
Councilmember Knudsen?
Aye,
And I take it you will serve as well?
aye.
And, and I
Aye,
vote
aye,
aye
aye.
as well. Okay, moving on. We have one more agenda item tonight.
Mayor, I considered voting not it, but I don't think that was appropriate.
Okay, moving on to our last agenda item, the liquor license fee refund. City Clerk Sint, would you give us the report on this, please?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So as you are all very aware, March 13th, 2020, Governor Walz declared a peacetime emergency due to COVID-19 and subsequent executive orders, which resulted in closure and ongoing modifications of service models for our on-sale liquor establishments. And this has included being unable to serve any liquor for a month from March 17th to April 17th. Then legislation was passed to allow on-sale licensees to sell off-sale with food-to-go orders. That began April 18th. And as the licensing authority, U.S. Council did support this legislation at your April 27th meeting. Then June 1st, outdoor seating was allowed with distancing and limited capabilities. So the May 26th meeting, Council granted flexibility to staff in working with establishments to create the outdoor spaces. And we have had 5 establishments that applied and were granted this permission for the temporary outdoor seating. So currently, they have 50% indoor seating that is available to them also. However, operations still cannot exist at 100% capacity. At your June 22nd meeting, the question was raised as to whether the city would be granting refunds for on-sale liquor license fees. And council expressed a desire to explore the refunding of portion of the fee. Now, in comparison, off-sale stores have not been restricted in their operations throughout this whole time, and as such, no modification to their license fee is necessary. So when considering the refund, please keep in mind that generally, license fees are not intended to be a revenue source, rather to reimburse for costs or expenses incurred in providing municipal services. Now, specific to Maplewood, we have 27 on-sale establishments. We have a slightly complex fee structure, and the annual fees range anywhere from $2,500 to $12,400. We in Maplewood do offer our on-sale licensees the option of a split payment option, and 12 of our establishments still owe for their second half of 2020. Usually this is due June 30th, but we did hold off because we knew questions were coming our way as to what council would possibly consider doing. And so at this point, we do need to get a bill out to them. We would recommend that we would send the bill out with an August 31st due date and an explanation of what council decision is. Originally, we had thought we would be able to prorate the bill, but in talking with Finance Director Paul Seth, she recommends that we keep the billing and the refund as separate actions. And so we will do it that way. So we can show clear intent as to what is happening here. Another thing to remember is that when we looked at this, we looked at uniformly applying the refund to all 27 licensees. And that obviously could change if council directed us otherwise. The reason I bring this up is that not all on sale establishments have been able to use the modifications. because of their physical location, and some have chosen not to use the modifications, saying they're going to remain closed until they are allowed to be back at 100%. So using that uniform approach, each month a refund comes to about $15,469.50. And we put together just a real simple chart on page 50 that shows the comparison. If there was a 1 month refund or 2 months or 3 months. And another thing to keep in mind is that looking forward, the 2021 license fee will be due December 31st, 2020. And the split payment option will be available to all these on-sale licensees again. So tonight, what we're looking for is a determination of whether council would like to grant refunds, and if so, for how many months they would like to do that. And then just a note that we would not be issuing the refunds until Finance Director Paul Seth gives us the clear to make sure that everything is processed properly. And with that, I am available for any questions.
Thank you, City Clerk Sint. I really appreciate that. In our discussions last time when I brought this to the council, I mentioned that a number of cities are doing this around the state, actually. I've talked with a number of other mayors. I've seen it on the mayor's listserv that I'm on. I know some of our neighboring cities have done it. I think Councilmember Knudsen summarized it as a reinvestment in sustainability. And I certainly am in favor of trying to provide a little bit of relief to those businesses that sorry about that. Anyway, I'm in favor of providing a bit of relief to people so that we can, we really are trying to assist them in helping them during these challenging times. It was no fault of their own that everything got shut down, and the liquor license really just basically sat there and they weren't able to utilize it. I guess I'll just come right out and I'm in favor of a 2 month refund. I'm certainly aware, as I think as everyone else, it was in our report, that this type of an action is also, it would qualify for COVID funds. The City Manager Coleman, can you address that maybe just a little bit?
Yes, thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council. It is my understanding that the City Council is able to give grants to our business community. And Ms. Palthus and myself will be putting together a policy for your consideration. And we would recommend that we not issue refunds until that policy is adopted by the council, because as you can imagine, there will be a lot of people that will be requesting CARES money from us, and we have to really take care in how we prioritize the distribution of those funds. So we are all in favor of helping this group out because they do have some extenuating circumstances. And we will be bringing a policy for your consideration at one of our upcoming meetings. I think that will help guide other discussions as we move forward.
Thank you for that. Councilmember Neblett, your thoughts?
Thank you, Mayor. This is one of those times when I am really glad that we have discussion on the council, because when this was brought up last time, I was like, what? We're going to do what? We're going to give back money? And just the discussion from my fellow council members really helped me understand why this is a good thing to help our businesses. I know that sounds kind of silly, but I was just thinking of it in terms of, you know, dollars and cents, and thinking about our budget as it is. But if we could get, I mean, if these dollars this benefit that we provide. If we could get COVID funds to make up for them, I'm all in for 3 months. So that's all I have. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Neblett. Councilmember Juniman.
I agree certainly with this whole idea. I am with you. 2 months is where I am. I'm not in favor of 3.
Okay. Councilmember Smith. We'll come back to you, Councilmember Smith. I think you're probably having trouble with your mute button. Councilmember Knudsen.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I was on.
Oh, Councilmember Smith.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought I was unmuted. I was just sitting here talking to myself. The one question I had is, would we be able to, if we went with the 2-month option, could we just renew it in 2 months if that seems like a good idea?
City Manager Coleman, do you want to weigh in on that?
Certainly. It would be my understanding, Councilmember Smith, that the council is free to determine how to disperse the funds. We just have to disperse the funds by November 15th or have those costs projected. So I think we have a little leeway there. If that's something that you would, we can continue to monitor, what the state is doing and how well we're doing and when we're able to open up. But it's my understanding that the funds have to be spent this year and they have to be for expenses incurred this year.
Okay. So I would be favorable then to 2 months with the option if we did, feel like it was necessary to extend it. That gives us flexibility.
Okay. Councilmember Knudsen.
I would agree with Councilmember Smith's and other assessments. This is a good plan. 2 months seems right.
Okay, then council members, do I have a motion? The motion is on page 49 of 50. We have to include in the motion the number of months that we're willing to approve for the refund.
I move to approve the refund of 2 months of license fees for all on-sale liquor licenses.
Second.
Moved by Smith, seconded by Knudsen. A motion to approve the refund of 2 months of license fees for all on-sale liquor licenses in Maplewood. Any further discussion? Councilmember Neblett.
No, thank you.
Councilmember Juniman.
No, thank you.
Councilmember Smith. Councilmember Knudsen.
No, thank you.
Okay. With that, then, let's move on to a vote. Councilmember Neblett.
Aye.
Councilmember Juniman.
Aye.
Councilmember Smith.
Aye.
Councilmember Knudsen.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. The motion passes. And that concludes our business for tonight. Council members, as in past virtual meetings, we've done a round robin of final points that you would like to make. Tonight, we'll start with Councilmember Neblett.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Like I said before, I just really appreciate the depth of knowledge that I am privy to working with my fellow council members. I really appreciate your insights and I've learned so much since I've been on the council, and it has a lot to do with the people that I sit on the council with. So thank you. I'd also like to I'm going to give a shout out to Michael Foles. I am out of town and my computer got completely white. It was if I had a brand new iPad. And I'm telling you, Michael Foles has the patience of Job and the knowledge of who? I don't even know. We're
Go with
so
Solomon.
lucky. Solomon, there it is. Thank you. We're just so lucky to have people who know their job so well and are kind and patient and just really, really easy to work with. So I learned a lot too this week with Michael Foles. So I appreciate your knowledge, Michael. And I appreciate really everybody in the city. I really do. I just wanted to say thank you. And hope you guys aren't too hot.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Juniman.
Listen, Councilmember Neblett, Michael lived through getting me on an iPad. He can do anything.
Amen.
Yeah.
Again, I would like to thank staff as well on going through all of this, but of course, in particular, in the last couple of weeks with the homeless camp, and how absolutely sterling I thought everyone's reaction and job responsibilities were for this. People were kind. People were there every day. I can't imagine that the people that were in that camp did not feel respected despite their circumstance. And I thank everybody. It's not easy, and I'm again proud of us as a city for handling whatever comes our way. And we have done, I think, pretty darn well through all of this. And I think the same thing is true of getting to the point this fast and now having our focus groups of people willing to work on the programming for the Nature Center and excuse me, Parks and Rec. That says we're serious about this. We don't want this to not be part of our existence. Contrary, we want it up and running as well as it can, and weathering not this, but just any economic issue down the road. Things are not, as we know, going to get better in the immediate future. So we're just pivoting into place so that we can put this back online and keep it moving and have great offerings for the city and the people in the city. And others who like to come too, but residents first. I just think it's a wonderful thing that we did it this rapidly. I am, and I think it will move forward. Everything has bumps. This will too. Oh, well. But I think it's a good thing. And if people choose to participate and want to be heard, here's your opportunity. Whoever, they say, you who participate get to say something. So you're the one who makes it happen. So please think carefully, everyone, and if you would like to be part of this, apply. And thanks to staff for spending yet again more time on something like this. It's amazing to me because obviously day-to-day operations take more time and more effort when they're being done the way we have to do them now. So I thank everybody on staff who keeps us moving and keeps us able to do our jobs. I just think this is actually quite phenomenal.
Thank you for those. Councilmember Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. Echo the team here. I mean, I think it's been a really good team. I had a neighbor from South Maplewood reach out to me the other day, sort of asked me, said, well, hey, you're not running again. So tell me about all these people running for office. And I said, I am really proud of the people I work with, and really would, hope that they continue on because it has been such an awesome team. I think as we go through these challenging times, it's so easy for us to get wrapped up in how difficult it is and the challenges in front of us. But I keep kind of being amazed when I sit back of all the things I'm learning. And as Councilmember Neblett said, I think these times have a lot to teach us about our values and what's important to us and how we do things. And so I think I'm really proud that I think Maplewood is continuing to listen and learn through the process. So thank you.
Where'd everybody go?
I think Mary Lee must think she's unmuted. Mary Lee, you're muted.
Okay. Councilmember Knudsen. Thank you, Councilmember Smith, for your comments.
Thanks, Grandma. So kind of an interesting week with emails coming in. I got a couple emails from people that thought that wearing masks were optional and in fact were harmful. They had meta-analysis and all that. Got another email from a lady that was very upset about Cub Foods. So I was thinking, you know, most of us try and be collective on the council, but my personal feelings are, I want to give a shout out to Menards. They expect everyone to wear a mask. And so I asked this morning, I asked the manager, I said, how's it going? I mean, he said, well, we got a few, but generally speaking, once you establish that your expectation is masks, that everybody complies. So we personally shop at places that we're comfortable with. And so I'm giving my own personal point of view that you need to wear masks. It's very important. Can argue all you want, but I think it's science suggests that that's good. I had an interesting discussion with my business partner this morning, who is a geriatrician. We have arrangements with about 60 nursing homes. And he looked at me and said, you know, Bill, this thing morphed. He said, this COVID, the way it started months ago and what it's doing right now are very different. And so I'm just saying, from all things being equal, I think we need to really work hard to protect each other. And yes, trying to continue to work through this problem. But I think, you know, it's just really a pleasure to be in Maplewood. Let's put it that way. People are really thoughtful.
And my final comments, you know, I've been in Maplewood over 25 years, and I look at what we have gone through, the way that our leadership team has really led us to continue to provide services to our residents. You know, the council adapting to these artificial virtual meetings. You know, in all of my time in Maplewood, I never thought that I would ever have to institute a curfew in Maplewood. And this most recent week shut down a homeless camp in Maplewood. You know, these really are highly unusual times, but I really appreciate staff and how hard they work. I also really appreciate all of my council members that are willing to, you know, participate and really dig into some of these issues. And we're not straying away from any of the difficult issues. We're having important dialogues about the future of our city during just a completely unprecedented time in history. And so I couldn't be happier to be serving with all of my fellow council members and our staff, our senior leadership team, and all of our staff at Maplewood who keep things running. You know, we're all trying to do the very best that we can, and let's just keep at it and let's keep everybody safe, because I truly believe that we are going to come out of this in a much stronger position, and we will be much wiser for the lessons that we will have learned through this time. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I am going to adjourn our meeting. And thank you very much, everyone, for all of your effort in putting the meeting together. Much appreciated.